A big assumption that some people make when getting into the Five Nights at Freddy's lore is that all of the games are in chronological order, or that each game's events lead into the next. However, if things were that simple, the timeline would not be debated as frequently as it is. There are many pieces of evidence throughout the games that point to which goes where, but again, it's not as simple as you might think. Some chronology is more clear than others, as we can usually be certain the general time frame parts of a game takes place. It's rare we ever get any concrete dates. And yes, parts of a game mean that certain events can be taking place at wildly different times as others. In general though, the agreed upon order of the games is kind of FNAF 4, FNAF 2, FNAF 1, FNAF 3, Pizzeria Simulator, Ultimate Custom Night, Help Wanted, and then Security Breach. FNAF World and AR's canonicity are questionable, but are still worth considering in terms of lore. As for sister location, that's its own can of worms that almost no one agrees on. So why is it that FNAF 2 is a prequel to FNAF 1? There's a lot of evidence that makes this clear, even only considering these games as opposed to the entire franchise. But 2 points are pretty much indisputable. 1. The fact that the phone guy is alive during FNAF 2 when he seems to have been killed while recording the FNAF 1 messages.
I may not be around to send you a message tomorrow. It's been a bad night here for me.
They are clearly meant to be the same character, and it would not really make sense for the phone guy to somehow survive his encounter in FNAF 1, only to pretend like he still doesn't really know what's going on with animatronics in FNAF 2.
He expressed concern that certain characters seem to move around at night. From what we know, that should be impossible.
Also, phone guy saying that he'll take over the night shift when the restaurant reopens in FNAF 2 fits very cleanly when considering that his FNAF 1 messages are recorded during his last week on the night shift.
When the place eventually opens again, I'll probably take the night shift myself. I'm finishing up my last week now, as a matter of fact, so...
The second part is the paychecks you receive at the end of Night 5 and Night 6 of FNAF 2. We get direct confirmation that the game takes place in November of 1987. While we can't directly compare these dates with FNAF 1's checks, as they don't give a year, we can still infer that FNAF 1 takes place after 1987. Phone Guy refers to the infamous bite of 87 in his FNAF 1 messages.
They used to be allowed to walk around during the day, too, but then there was the bite of 87. Yeah.
You wouldn't specify the year that an event happened if it was the current year.
Well, it all goes back to the summer of 83.
Can you just tell it quickly?
Yeah, sure.
Just based off this alone, we can be fairly certain that 1987, and by extension FNAF 2, happens at least several years before FNAF 1. The FNAF 3 description on Steam directly says that it takes place 30 years after Freddy Fazbear's Pizza closes. So we know that it takes place a long time after FNAF 1 and 2, but can we reach the same conclusion using only info present in the games? Yes, actually. Aside from the opening newspaper calling the pizzeria decades old, the presence of the empty shells of the toy animatronics proves that it takes place at least after they were scrapped at the end of FNAF 2. Similarly, FNAF 3's End of Night minigame shows the purple guy dismantling all of the original FNAF 1 animatronics. We also know they were never reassembled after this because the Fazbear Fright staff were unable to find a real animatronic until locating Springtrap in the back room.
I honestly thought we'd have more by now, but I have an even better surprise for you. We found one. A real one.
Therefore, in order for the events of FNAF 1 to take place, they need to happen before Purple Guy dismantles the animatronics, before FNAF 3. FNAF 4 has some of the most important minigames in the entire series. They depict perhaps the earliest events in the timeline, but how do we know this? Based on the decoration and characters present, we can conclude that the restaurant present in these minigames is the mysterious Fredbear's Family Diner, mentioned by Phone Guy in FNAF 2.
We're gonna try to contact the original restaurant owner. I think the name of the place was Fredbear's Family Diner or something like that. It's closed for years though, I doubt we'll be able to track anybody down.
Considering that Phone Guy also mentions that the diner closed down years before FNAF 2, that puts these minigames earlier than 1987. To nail down a point in time even more, the TV in the crying child's home plays a show called Fredbear and Friends, with the year listed as 1983. This pretty much confirms that these events are in 1983, and later games double down on this fact. The FNAF 4 gameplay sections make my skin crawl, not just because they are scary, but because its lore significance is so confusing. Going based on information in the game, it's easy to assume that these aren't just nightmares the crying child is having while in a comatose state after being bit by Fredbear. The rare hallucinations of hospital furniture back this up, however, cracks begin to form upon looking closer. The room in these gameplay sections does not match the crying child's bedroom from the minigames at all. Furthermore, a garbled up version of a FNAF 1 phone call rarely plays during these nights.
I hope you can settle in with your course hires.
It doesn't make sense how a child who died years before these messages were ever recorded would be hearing them in his nightmares. So, if the crying child isn't having these nightmares, then who is? We're getting a little off track now and more into theory territory, but it makes a lot more sense if the person having these nightmares is the older brother. The house featured in the minigames has a closed door that you can't get past, which could lead to a wing of the house more familiar to what we see in the gameplay sections, including the older brother's bedroom. Many theories also suggest that the older brother grows up to be the FNAF 1 security guard, which explains the presence of the phone call in the nightmares. Regardless, the tricky part of these timelines is no matter which way you go, you'll have weird inconsistencies, and you just have to find what fits the most cleanly and work from there. So, mainly due to the presence of the FNAF 1 call, I would put FNAF 4's gameplay in between FNAF 1 and FNAF 3 in the timeline. But I could completely understand putting it directly after FNAF 4's minigames too. Pizzeria Simulator is a lot more straightforward. We can thank good old Springtrap / William Afton / whatever this goofy design is for that. Springtrap was, well, trapped in a boarded up room until the events of FNAF 3, so the only way he can be present for Pizzeria Simulator is if it is after FNAF 3. And let's be real here, the speech at the end of Pizzeria Simulator is so badass and conclusive that it would be a crime if it was not at the end of the timeline. Hey, wait a minute. Ultimate Custom Night, while initially seeming to be a bonus add-on to cap off the first 6 games, actually has quite a bit of lore significance. Dialogue given after dying to certain animatronics seemed to pay Ultimate Custom Night as William Afton's personal hell. A death quote by Orville Elephant alludes to the fact that this is happening after all of them were burned in an attempt to release them.
He tried to release you. He tried to release us. I will keep you here, no matter how many times they burn us.
Which correlates directly to Pizzeria Simulator's ending. For that reason, we can put Ultimate Custom Night right after Pizzeria Simulator extending for all of eternity. It's possible that Afton has since escaped from his hell, but these just desserts is what good old Willie really deserves. Help Wanted is more about context clues than anything else. From the fact that the VR game featured in Help Wanted makes reference to previous entries, we can determine that it must take place after the events of at least FNAF 3. While a plush version of Scrap Baby also being featured in Help Wanted may indicate that it takes place after Pizzeria Simulator, there is technically, to my knowledge, no way to definitively confirm this. Regardless, it makes way more sense for Fazbear Entertainment to go through with their whole cover-up scheme after Henry has taken himself out of the picture. Also, since we know that the character corrupted by Glitch Trap during the events of Help Wanted is Vanny, that means that Help Wanted and Security Breach have to be in a relatively close proximity to each other. Security Breach, everyone's favorite game in the series. While the lore of this game is proving almost impossible to piece together, we can at least figure out when it takes place relatively easily. The Pizzaplex that Security Breach takes place in is built over the remains of the Pizzeria Simulator location, making it pretty easy to determine that it takes place after that game. Since Vanny is corrupted by Glitch Trap over the events of Help Wanted, her status as a pawn in this game brings Security Breach to the end of our timeline. Well, you were in the game for about 30 seconds, Vanny, but at least you were good for something. Sister Location. Oh, Sister Location. Well, let's get this over with. We know that it's at least before Pizzeria Simulator. The whole point of the game is that it results in Baby, Ballora, Funtime Freddy, and Funtime Foxy escaping from the facility as entered. So, since they are out and about during the events of Pizzeria Simulator, albeit now separated into Scrap Baby and Molten Freddy, we know that the events of Sister Location is before this. The best we can do from here is that Hand Unit mentions Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rentals opening after the
unfortunate closing of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza
on night 1. While that seems to be a big hint, this could be referring to 3 different events: the location that closed due to the missing children's incident, the FNAF 2 location, or the FNAF 1 location. Even then, who knows how long the actual game takes place after the rental service begins. At the very least, we can use this to narrow Sister Location to after FNAF 4, which is before any location shuts down, and before Pizzeria Simulator, which is when we see the Sister Location animatronics roaming free. From here, we need to be very careful in our approach, as no matter what placement we make, it ruins a lot of theories. And this is the main issue with trying to fit Sister Location into a timeline. There is not enough concrete information to determine when it takes place in relation to the other games. The placement of Sister Location seems to vary depending on the theory you are trying to make, rather than Sister Location having a time set in stone that theories need to be built around. But I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible. Michael Afton, the protagonist of Sister Location, gives a speech at the end of Custom Night directed towards his father, William Afton. It's implied that William was the one that told him to go down into the Sister Location facility, and that now the only thing Michael has left to do is find William.
Father, it's me, Michael. I found it. It was right where you said it would be. There is only one thing left for me to do now. I'm going to come find you.
And In my eyes, this is telling us that William was around to tell Michael about the facility, but is now missing. There are only 2 points in which William would have vanished. The FNAF 1 newspapers say that a suspect was charged during the missing children's incident, which would of course be William. However, even if William was arrested for a time, Michael would not be talking like his current location is a mystery during the speech in Sister location. Therefore, the much more likely option is that William vanished after being sealed up in the FNAF 1's location back room and left to die in the Spring Bonnie suit. Again, we know that William being sealed away has to happen after FNAF 1 since he dismantled the FNAF 1 animatronics, and there is no indication that they were ever reassembled afterwards. So, without diving into theory territory too much, the likeliest placement for Sister location, in my opinion, is shortly after FNAF 1. Keep in mind that this is just taking the actual games into consideration. There are many events that happen throughout the FNAF timeline that are only alluded to through minigames, dialogue, or other pieces of evidence. Placing those goes into full theory territory, and we are not at a point where we can definitively place each and every event. This timeline is, in general, the simplest I could boil down the actual games to. You could dispute the placements of Sister Location and FNAF 4's gameplay, however, this is what I believe fits the best with solely in-game information. As for the games of disputed canonicity, I would put Special Delivery in between Help Wanted and Security Breach, and FNAF World as a sort of weird thing that periodically is happening throughout the timeline in between FNAF 4's minigames and FNAF 3. So that brings us to the end of this video. I plan on making more videos in this series, sort of as basics to the FNAF lore, and in the future I plan on making my own FNAF theory videos too. So if you're interested in seeing that, be sure to like the video, subscribe, and ring the bell. Anyways, catch you next time.